Well, that could only mean one thing. One thing. The vice president of the Davis Institute for Foreign Policy and National Security at the Heritage Foundation, the author of the book, Battle for the Jewish State, How Israel and America Can Win, and former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump, Dr. Victoria Coates, who's very happy that the Eagles actually pulled off a win on Sunday. Dr. Coates, how are you, my friend?
Well, it's a heck of a day, Rich. I mean, the hits just keep coming.
Yeah, no kidding. You talking about Sunday's game or today?
I was just talking about the press conference.
Oh, the press conference. Okay. Well, where would you like to begin with the press conference? Is the president going to end up meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, you think?
Oh, I do think so. And that's probably the most important story that's kind of getting distracted from is the action that the president directed the Treasury Department to take yesterday to sanction the last two big Russian oil firms. Quite frankly, this should have happened in March of 2022, and the Biden administration never really wanted to do it. They sanctioned two of the big ones, but they left Rosneft and Lukoil, and we all see Lukoil stations on every corner. Don't use them. You're just putting money in Putin's pocket. If we had cut all of this oil off at the beginning of the war and done the really punitive measures that are in this package of sanctions, I think we could have gotten to the table a lot sooner. Biden didn't want to do it for more than 3 years. President Trump wanted to keep that card in his pocket. He thought we could get to a diplomatic resolution more quickly, gave it every chance. Putin has proved obstreperous, but I think those pictures of those little kids coming out of the bombed kindergarten were probably decisive. You know, Putin isn't getting any closer to peace. The president called off the Budapest summit and put these sanctions in last night. And this morning when we woke up, two very interesting things had happened. The official Chinese energy companies said they were ending their imports of Russian oil. Big deal. Now, they'll still cheat. They'll run them through their kind of shadow energy industry, but that's going to be a big reduction for Putin. And India made good on what was reported last week and said they were going to reduce. Those are the number one and number two buyers of Russian oil and gas. And so if they are both coming down literally the day after this was announced, I'll tell you two things. One, sanctions work. And two, this is the way to end the war.
This is the way to end the war because you're going after Vladimir Putin's pocketbook.
Exactly. And if he can't, I mean, one of the side effects of this is that he is running out of hard currency, and he is raiding what's known as Putin's rainy day fund. He's been sort of squirreling away a lot of the profits from the energy industry into a fund that is supposed to support things like pensions and, you know, medical payments and that kind of thing. So if suddenly he can't pay those after December, he will have a popular uprising on his hands. The Russian people are pretty tolerant, but they are not going to tolerate having, you know, their pensions removed in the middle of winter. And so he knows that. He knows he's running out of money, and what Trump did yesterday accelerates that process.
Now, the president said that the Wall Street Journal story was fake news. The story was U.S. lifts key restrictions on Ukraine's use of European long-range missiles. And it talked about the ability of Ukraine to use those missiles inside of Russia. And the president said that was fake news. He said a lot of what the Wall Street Journal writes is fake news. He took some shots at them. But what is the real story of what Kyiv is allowed to do here? And what's our role in kind of giving green lights here?
Well, I mean, it has to do with where the weapons come from. So these missiles come from European partners of Ukraine. They are the ones who then give Ukraine guidance on how they can use the missiles. I've always thought that was sort of a fool's game, because once you hand somebody a weapon in the middle of a shooting war, I don't know that they're going to pay a lot of attention to diplomatic niceties, and if they're even going to listen to you. So once you've given them the weapon, you've essentially given them the capability, whether you want them to use it or not. And that's why these decisions are so serious, and why the president is taking the Tomahawk decision very, very seriously. You know, when you're talking about handing out a missile that can go thousands of miles, yes, the Tomahawks could be beneficial in terms of hitting Russian energy infrastructure. But do we really want to get into a massive escalation because a Ukrainian soldier, however well-intentioned, who isn't fully trained on the Tomahawks, fires one into Moscow? And then, we have a conflagration on our hands and there's nothing we can do about it. And I think that's why the president decided now is not the moment for the Tomahawks. Again, that escalation he can use later. He hasn't taken it off the table. He just said he's not going to do it now. He was going to do this economic step in terms of the sanctions first. So that is, I think how this is going to work. But as I said, I'm never a big fan of folks trying to put restrictions on weapons they've given somebody who's in a war.
Yeah, because the whole point of a weapon is to use it. Right? But you could argue the mere presence of the weapons would be a deterrent, but we know that that's not the case with Putin. So, it just kind of becomes one of those situations where, eventually it probably will get used, or maybe in this case, Putin. It'll bring him to the table. I don't know. It's just hard to say. I agree with you, though. The economic stick seems to be what's going to get him a whole lot more than the missile stick, because we've tried the missile stick. We've been trying the missile stick for years, right?
Exactly. And with this one, with these kinds of sanctions, what you're hearing out of China and India is that their banks literally will not do business with Russia anymore because they do not want to lose access to the Federal Reserve, to the United States financial transaction system. They can't function properly without it. Mm-hmm. So even if Xi wants to keep buying Russian energy, even if Putin wants to keep selling energy to Modi, the Indian and the Chinese banks may just say, no, we're not doing that. We can't, or we go out of business. And Xi will say, well, I don't want my banking sector to go out of business. It's not worth it. That's the card that the president has played, and he has additional ones. So I would look in coming weeks, I'd look at the ruble, see what's happening to the Russian currency, look at what's happening to their foreign currency reserves, and see if that actually starts to get a move out of it.
Dr. Coates, let me ask you about Gaza. The president was asked about that today, too. And, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Vice President Vance were all there, obviously. The vice president said he feels like the peace, so far, it's off to a great start. It's going really, really well. What is the situation right now on the ground over there, as far as you can tell, as the author of the book, Battle for the Jewish State?
Well, I think that where we are right now is still at the tail end of phase one. We're still getting the bodies of the deceased hostages back. I saw very moving pictures at Ben Gurion Airport today. They were sending the body back of a Thai hostage who had been murdered and then body kept for 2 years. Nobody talks about Thailand as a participant in this crisis, but they have been. And the Israelis, of course, did the right thing, sent that body back with a ceremony and great dignity as almost a brother in all of this. And so process is still ongoing. My understanding is there are 11 or 12 bodies still in Gaza. Pressure needs to be on Hamas to get those people out of there, get an end to phase one. And then there are discussions of what happens in phase two. And if Hamas continues to refuse to disarm when we get to that phase, I think the president's been very clear. He will fully support their annihilation. It will not be pretty. It will involve a kind of a siege in Gaza City, which is going to be extremely ugly. I think all of the Palestinians who want to leave will be given permission to do so. And then Jared has talked about starting reconstruction in the parts of Gaza that Israel still occupies. So what you could see, and I actually worked directly with Jared as the dedicated NSC person on the deal of the century in the 2017-2018 timeframe. He knows as well as anyone the kinds of projects that need to be done in Gaza to make life tenable for everyday Gazans. And in an ironic way, the war has made those projects easier because you're starting from scratch. You're not trying to reuse old stuff or sort of cobble around things. You can just start from scratch. So the desalinization plants, the wastewater treatment facilities, the electricity generation plants, those can all be brand new and shiny. And heaven knows there's enough money in the region to pay for the best of the best. So if the people of Gaza, after 2 years of war, which they've never seen before, Rich, remember the international community has always forced the Israelis to stop fighting after 6-7 weeks when there are these flare-ups. 2 years of war is something the Gazans have not seen before. So they may be in a different mindset. They may be of a mindset that they simply cannot endure any more of this, and they want to go to a reconstructed area. And if that's what Israel and the United States and the Gulf allies are offering them, heck, they may just leave Hamas to their own devices.
Dr. Coates, let me ask you about another piece in the Wall Street Journal. This one is Trump's Donroe Doctrine, which I guess is a play on words with the Monroe Doctrine. It's
It is.
Monroe. It says from attacking drug boats to going after Venezuela's leader, the president is putting the Western Hemisphere at the center of his foreign policy. For those that don't know, can you give us a brief history of the Monroe Doctrine and why this is being compared to it?
Yes, I believe Monroe was our fourth president, and he was the author of the Monroe Doctrine, which was a foreign policy designed to establish U.S. primacy in the Western Hemisphere, and that this was our neighborhood, our interests would take precedent, and that we would be kind of the hegemon of, that's sort of a negative word, but the main power of the region. And that has been our policy on paper ever since, but very few presidents have actually enforced it. We've allowed the Soviets to go into Cuba, which has been a disaster. We've allowed the slow motion train wreck that has been Venezuela over the last 30 years. I'm old enough to remember Hugo Chavez, as well as Nicolas Maduro, and just what has been done to that beautiful, prosperous country. Used to be an ally of the United States, now is a huge security concern. More recently, what's happened in Colombia, where we had a great and good friend of the United States in Colombia become a sort of satellite to Venezuela under Gustavo Petro, disastrous for the United States. And the president is looking at this as the single national security challenge that has the greatest impact on the everyday lives of Americans. And bear in mind, China is involved in this too. That's why he's going after Panama. That's why he's going after the fentanyl that is originally coming out of China. So their fingerprints are all over this as well. But he understands that is the single biggest physical challenge to the people of the United States. So the Donroe Doctrine is reviving the Monroe Doctrine, saying we won't tolerate this. We are going to reach out to partners and allies. We're going to help our friends. Look at what we're doing banking-wise with Argentina. That's an incredible thing we're doing. I think we will get to a deal with Panama. And then now starting to take kinetic action against the designated as terrorist group cartels who are trying to run the drugs up by sea, and has even threatened by land. And he said he'd go talk to Congress about it. So I think we can all be on the same page that the president is not being too mean to the cartels, that they deserve everything they're getting, and that we have to end this scourge, this danger to the American people.
What did you make of when the president of Colombia was talking about Trump and then snapped his fingers and said, or we'll just take him out? What did you take from that, Dr. Victoria Coates?
Yeah, Gustavo Petro is a piece of work, and the person who's going to be taken out is Petro in the March elections in Venezuela. He can't run for re-election, so in 4 months, guess what? Donald Trump will still be here, or 6 months, Donald Trump will still be here, and he won't. So that's just a lot of bluster. As the president said, he's a thug. He's really ruined a very successful country. Interestingly, through radical green policies, Colombia is becoming a major energy developer and exporter, and he cut it all off in the name of climate. He said, we're going to stop all of these projects that are bringing prosperity to the people of Colombia. So just a disgrace. The former ambassador to D.C., to Washington, Pinzon, is running for president. I think he's very likely to win. He will be a great friend to all of us. And so I'm actually hopeful that the Colombian situation is not as far gone as the Venezuelan and can be resolved through the election in March.
I got to ask you about another thug, if I could, Dr. Victoria Coates. As somebody who was
There's so many.
There's so many in a short period of time here. But as somebody who was spied on by a thug like John Brennan, I'd like to play a clip for you. If we could cue up cut 33 for Dr. Coates. Brennan, obviously now facing criminal indictment for lying to Congress. I'd say it's very, very long overdue. I do want to play this for you and get your reaction. Cut 33.
Why do you think Trump is so obsessed with rewriting the history of his win in 2016?
I think you'd have to ask him, and I know he's not going to appear on your program, but clearly he is a very, very sensitive and insecure individual. I think he believes, maybe with some justification, that Russian interference in that election did help him be victorious. And so he's trying to discredit the assessments that were done, the intelligence that is there. He continues to go back at this, and that's why they keep talking about the Russia hoax, the Russia hoax. No, as you pointed out, the conclusions that the intelligence community reached have been validated numerous times by these bipartisan committees in the Senate and these studies that have been done. So he's still trying to, again, refute what is clearly obvious, I think, to any right-minded individual, that Russia interfered on behalf of Donald Trump in 2016. And rather than focus on all the things that need to be done in this country, trying to take care of all the challenges that we face domestically and internationally, he continues to go back with that.
Thank you. Pause it. Dr. Coates, it's only so much I could take of him. What is he talking about with this Russian interference in 2016? I thought we put that to bed and found out the whole thing was a gigantic hoax.
That's what finally has to happen now, because Brennan will just not stop peddling these lies that there was some decisive Russian intervention. As much as we can figure out, Russia bought a couple of $100 or a couple of hundred, whatever it was, Facebook ads, and it was a de minimis amount of money that was spent. I think it was hundreds of thousands, and that it had absolutely no discernible effect on the election. And so that it's nonsensical. And all of the things that Brennan was basing his findings on, the Steele dossier, that sort of nonsense, has been revealed as utterly false, made up, paid for by the Clinton campaign. The whole thing is just a tissue of lies. And what's so serious about it, though, Rich, is what came out of it. And having been on the transition 2016, 2017, what went down there when Brennan was still in power, Comey was still in power. All these people used their power during the transition to go after General Flynn. And that's what happened to Mike. And it was just so damaging to the president. If you lose your chosen national security advisor 30 days into your first term, when you're still figuring out where all the levers of power are in the U.S. government, which isn't an easy thing to do, it's extremely debilitating. And that's what John Brennan did. That's what Barack Obama did. That's what Joe Biden did to President Trump. They weren't hoping for him to be successful. They wanted to set him up for failure. And more credit to him that he didn't fail, even despite all the horrible things they did. But that's why it's so important we get to the bottom of the Brennan mess now, so it doesn't happen again.
Well, the credit to the president, yes, but he also had brilliant people around him like yourself, Dr. Victoria Coates, as a former deputy national security advisor. What amazes me about Brennan and Clapper and Comey, I mean, Brennan, the guy who breaks into the SCIF when they're investigating torture, bipartisan Senate committee chaired by Dianne Feinstein, breaks into the SCIF, steals all their files, and is lauded and treated like a hero by the media and the left just simply because he doesn't like Donald Trump. I mean, at one point they were yelling the guy was a war criminal. Clapper lies about spying on the American people, lies before Congress. Senator Ron Wyden tries to give him a chance to take it back, and he still doubles down on the lie. I mean, these are bad people that have done a lot of damage to our Constitution and weaponized this government against us when we gave them a lot of power to fight terrorism. And they're treated like heroes just because they simply hate Donald Trump. And then they're the architects of Russia, this Russia collusion nonsense narrative, and purposely lead the media down this road of saying, well, it must be real since we briefed the president of the United States on it, and then, leaking that to the press. They're just bad people. And the fact that Nicole Wallace sits there and gushes with a guy like that just shows you how unserious the American media really is. All you have to do is just be anti-Trump, and that's all it takes, and all of your past sins are forgiven.
They're not only forgiven, they're celebrated. Yeah. And it's just, this is the piece of Washington that particularly has to be broken, which is the bipartisan blob. as I call it. It's both on the left and the right. It's folks who just are addicted to the government gravy train. They cycle in and out of administrations every time. They are sort of drunk on power. They think they're the masters of the universe. They know best. And that's what the president has really gotten out of this second term. These people aren't part of it. They hate it. And it's making them particularly crazy that he's being so successful. They're trying to make him out to be this stooge at best, and criminal at worst. And here he is, restoring our economy, strengthening our borders, going after our enemies both here and abroad. Not causing another war with China. In fact, causing peace to break out across the world. I think that's why they're getting even more unhinged. The president said it in the press conference this afternoon. He thinks doctors get more money when they have to treat Trump derangement syndrome because it's such a deep-rooted disease. And so they deserve to be paid more. And, that's hard on our insurance companies, but I think it's probably true.
Yeah, and it's good for Big Pharma, really, because there's just not enough drug cocktails out there for people like that. That's for sure. But what about the fact of the destruction to the East Wing of the White House that he's causing, the irreparable damage and harm to the East Wing? Because it's funny how with everything he's doing that is destroying America, this fascist and tyrant, they're still taking time to talk about the damage he's doing to architecture. That is quite something right there.
Well, as the Heritage Foundation's resident art historian, I took to X to express my views on this, of which I have many, which is that this is absolutely ridiculous. So the White House is a campus, as I'm sure you're aware, of 17 acres. A number of structures are on those 17 acres that have been built from the beginning of the 19th century on. So it's not as if it's some sort of temple of architectural purity. You have the sort of federal classicism of the main body of the White House, very beautiful, iconic. President would never touch that. You have the Second Empire classicism of the EEOB. Again, it's an iconic building. But the East Wing was built in 1942, essentially as utilitarian office space. This is not in any way a architectural treasure. You could argue it's actually sort of a flaw on the White House campus. And the other thing the White House doesn't have is a room that can take more than 200 people. So think about that. In Washington, D.C., if you want to have more than 200 people at an event with the President of the United States, you need a tent. That's your recourse. Yeah. You don't have a room. And so the President had identified that. I mean, I think about things like signing the Abraham Accords. We had to do that on the South Lawn. It was a beautiful day by the grace of God. It could have been 110 degrees, or a horrible monsoon. It wasn't, but that's what we've been facing. So I think he established this was a need. He figured out where this building could go. He got the private funding. It's not costing the taxpayers anything. And it's an expression of our own time. 2025 will have its mark on the White House campus. That's great. That's not something to complain about.
No, it's not. And the East Wing is I mean, you go through there if you're going to visit the White House, there's nothing there. I mean, that's the thing. It's just offices. Nobody was even aware of it until all this outrage started, and now we're going to get a beautiful ballroom. It is amazing that you can't have more than 200 people in an event. The other thing is, I just can't believe it took them this long to put pavers down in the Rose Garden, because the first thing I did in our old house when we moved in was pave the backyard so I could have a grill out there and people could hang out outside and not have to worry about, like, everybody does that. Everybody puts pavers down nowadays. Nobody just hangs out on their lawn. But that was the Rose Garden, and he put the pavers down. They were outraged about that for about a week, and then they kind of moved on to something else. But now to listen to Hillary Clinton, whose husband literally rented out the Lincoln bedroom to the highest bidder, and Steven Spielberg paid $1 million to stay there, scream about how this is grift. How is it grift when he's not even going to really get to use it? I mean, and here's what I say, Dr. Coates. I believe this sincerely. Democrats running for president should vow to not only never step foot in the Trump ballroom, they should vow to knock it down. Tear down this ballroom should be the rallying cry for Democrats in South Carolina.
Well, I also thought it was Rich, because Rich is in ironic, not as in your name, because renting out the Lincoln bedroom is hardly the worst thing that the Clintons did to defile the White House. So that's so outrageous.
There's that. There's that. Yeah.
We won't go
Using
there.
the Oval Office as a humidor and it much, yeah, that's, anyway, yeah, but tear down this ballroom, Mr. Gorbachev, could be their rallying cry going into Iowa. But the thing is, you know that they'll all use it. If God forbid ever a Democrat becomes, right, and they'll use it and they'll do grand events. And I think the biggest thing they're worried about, honestly, the biggest source of outrage, Dr. Coates, is just the fact that it's going to be a legacy of Donald Trump left on the White House. And that's the part they hate the most.
And it certainly will be referred to as the Trump ballroom, like the Lincoln bedroom, and
the
that
Truman
will make them
balcony.
completely insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will drive them nuts.
That's the best revenge.
It would be worth Gavin Newsom becoming president just so he would have to be in that. I'm just kidding. Nothing would be worth that. But anyway, always a pleasure, my friend. Follow Dr. Coates on X at Victoria Coates. She does have a PhD in art history, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I do, from Penn.
So I'm very happy that of all of this talk, they bring you on Fox News a lot to talk about foreign policy stuff. They really should have you on about the architecture. I'm just saying.
We'll see if I get a hit.
All right. If I know somebody, I'll give them I'll give them that thought. Dr. Coates, have a great rest of your weekend, and I appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you. Go Birds.
Go Birds.
It's the 5 o'clock happy hour on the Rich Zeoli Show. Brought to you by the Oceanfront Grand Hotel of Cape May, New Jersey. A premier full-service resort and conference center. GrandHotelCapeMay.com.